UFC 320 just took place a couple days ago, and Alex Pereira has reclaimed the light heavyweight throne by first round TKO over Magomed Ankalaev. In this video, we are going to matchmake for the important fighters that fought this past weekend at UFC 320. If this is the first time you've ever seen my channel, my name is Wyatt. This is Fight Society, and let's get into the fights to make after UFC 320. Okay, the first fight that we have to make, the most important one, is Poatan Alex Pereira reclaiming his spot back at the top of the sport. Aura restored, order restored, superstardom maintained, GOAT status, speed run. There's just so many good things to say about Alex Pereira. He made a lot of excuses after the first Magomed Ankalaev fight, saying he had a broken hand, that he was fighting some sort of virus. As it turned out, he was not lying. He was actually telling the truth. He was battling a lot at UFC 313 because at UFC 320, he absolutely smoked Magomed Ankalaev. And frankly, there is only one possible fight, reasonable fight, and it happens to be the biggest fight of an era, of the modern UFC era. It'll be the biggest fight of the Paramount era because it'll happen next year, and I think it'll happen at the White House. And that is UFC heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall. If he beats Ciryl Gane in about 2.5 weeks' time at UFC 321, this is the only fight to make. Alex Pereira has talked about Jon Jones. This is the only fight to make because Tom Aspinall has the belt. Alex Pereira looking to become the first fighter ever to win a third belt in a different weight class. These are the two most reliable guys with belts right now, if we're being honest, besides Merab. These guys show up, put on a good show. Merab doesn't always put on a good show, but Pereira and Aspinall, they show up ready, put on a good show. They don't make a whole sideshow out of the event like a Nate Diaz or a Hamzat or a Connor, where they've had tons of issues backstage that have messed up the event. There's no BS really when it comes to Pereira or Aspinall. That's what they need. Dana White said himself, that's what they need. They need guys that they can rely on for the White House. And I know neither of these guys are American, but I don't think it needs to be an American headlining because there's going to be plenty of Americans on the card. I think that you got to do Pereira versus Aspinall as the main event. Massive, biggest fight since Conor and Khabib. If we're being honest, biggest fight since Conor and Khabib. Put it on the White House card. Tom Aspinall continues building his resume because really after Ciryl Gane, there really isn't much for him in this heavyweight division in the UFC. And Pereira looking to basically become the GOAT of the sport. I think the way that this goes for Pereira to become the GOAT of the sport is he has to beat Aspinall and then he has to beat a Jon Jones coming back. Like if Pereira can do that, nobody will question his GOAT status. He's already passed Khabib. I'll talk about that in a different video. He's already a top 5 guy of all time in my opinion, but Aspinall and Jones would make him, bar none, the best fighter of all time. And given that this matchup means Alex Pereira moving up to heavyweight, there is no interim belt or champ hanging onto the belt while he moves up to a new division. He has to vacate. And so what that means, in my humble opinion, Jiri Prochazka and Carlos Ulberg for the vacant UFC light heavyweight championship sometime on the early to mid next year part of the Paramount deal. January is most likely, if you guys haven't seen the rumors, January is likely to be Topuria versus Gaethje in Los Angeles. February, they've been doing in Australia the last 3 years now. And so I could see Carlos Ulberg, Jiri Prochazka, February numbered card, because they're not pay-per-views anymore, being that main event in Australia. Carlos Ulberg main eventing against Jiri Prochazka for the vacant light heavyweight championship. Jiri Prochazka already said that he accepted the Carlos Ulberg matchup at UFC Perth. Ulberg turned it down and chose Dom Reyes. Jiri fought Khalil and won. Now you put that matchup back together, same guys, same place, but different time and for the belt. Jiri Prochazka, Carlos Ulberg. It makes perfect sense. Both great strikers. I know Yuri's got an awkward striking style, but hey, he knocks out some of the best guys in the sport, or at least in his division. Jiri, Ulberg, vacant title fight. And that leaves the two other light heavyweights that lost on this card. You take Magomed Ankalaev and you take Khalil Roundtree. Both of them got TKO'd. Khalil got knocked out and took a lot of damage. Ankalaev broke his ribs, allegedly broke his ribs going into the fight with Alex Pereira. So they're going to need some time off. So you don't put them on the same card as Jiri and Carlos Ulberg in like February. You make them a fight night main event sometime in April or so of next year. And then potentially the winner of that gets in there with the winner of Jiri and Ulberg for the belt. Maybe you get a Jiri versus Khalil Roundtree for the belt. How sick would that rematch be? Or Jiri versus Ankalaev or Ulberg against either of those guys. If Alex Pereira is going to leave the division, it doesn't have to mean like famine for the 205 division. You do have some big name guys that you can still mix around. I know you also got Jan Blachowicz. You also got Dom Reyes that are still up there a little bit towards the top of the division. But outside of that, it looks pretty bleak. I know there's some guys making some moves like Modestas Bukauskas. There's some guys making some noise, but it's just not the most star-studded division. And I think the way that you keep this division alive for the next year and a half is you take Jiri, Ulberg, Ankalaev, Roundtree, Blachowicz, and Dom Reyes, and you shuffle them around with each other and see what happens with the title mix there. Who knows? Maybe Jon Jones goes down to 205. You never know. But you got to keep that division alive if Alex Pereira is going to leave it, which I think he will. He said that he is not going to be able to cut to 205 for much longer. I think UFC 320 was Alex Pereira's last fight at light heavyweight. And it's crazy that that's the case considering he used to make middleweight. But that's how I would match up the 205 division. Pereira up to heavyweight, Jiri and Ulberg for the belt, Ankalaev and Khalil Roundtree as a fight night main event sometime next year, mid next year, April, May, something like that, because they both took a lot of damage. They're going to need some time off. Khalil probably won't train for a month, at least 2 months. Probably won't spar for 2 to 3 months. So we move on from there to the co-main event winner. That is the bantamweight champion, Merab Dvalishvili. Now, Merab dominated Corey Sandhagen. A couple of good moments for Corey Sandhagen, but it was a textbook Merab Dvalishvili performance. 49-45 on 2 cards, 49-46 on another card. Exactly what I said was going to happen. I actually predicted these fights incredibly well. I had Jiri and Pereira by KO, and I had Merab by 49-46 decision, which was one of the cards. So I basically had those top 3 fights on point. If we're being real, Peter Yan is the only guy besides Umar Nurmagomedov who fights Mario Batista in a couple weeks. Peter Yan is the only guy that can, will, and deserves to fight Merab Dvalishvili. Either that be in December as the co-main event to Volkanovski versus fill in the blank. That's looking like what that card's going to be. Or as the co-main event in Los Angeles to Ilya and Justin Gaethje in January. I think that's a great fight too. I think that's a fantastic co-main event. Ilya Topuria, biggest star in the sport, just knocked out Oliveira, making a title defense. And Merab, who's from the same country as him, in the same building that he beat Umar in last year in Los Angeles, fighting Peter Yan. Fans love Peter Yan. I still would have Merab winning that fight, but Merab says Peter Yan's the next guy. December, January, something like that. It makes perfect sense. We move on to the co-main event loser, Corey Sandhagen. And selfishly, there's really only one guy that I want to see Corey Sandhagen fight. That's Sean O'Malley. Corey Sandhagen, Sean O'Malley has been my absolute dream fight in the bantamweight division for like 2-3 years now. And I was hoping that O'Malley would beat Merab and then Sandhagen could get a title shot against O'Malley, but it didn't work out. We could now have it as a contenders fight because the winner of this fight could probably get in for another fight with Merab, if we're being honest, or after that plus one more win. It looks like Sean O'Malley is going to be fighting Song Yadong, just rumors, but is in the works for December or January. I could see that getting put on the card as well. Topuria, Gaethje, Merab and Peter Yan, Song Yadong and Sean O'Malley. Like, that's a really stacked card to open the Paramount deal, especially with Ilya on top of it. But this is the fight I want to see. So if Sean O'Malley gets through or even doesn't get through Song Yadong, I think you do. Sandhagen, he just fought. He's going to need some time off. He did get beat up a little bit, got hit in the head a lot. O'Malley going to fight in December, January. I say you do this on the White House card next year. I say you do it in June. That would give Corey Sandhagen 8 months off. That would give O'Malley like 6-7 months, 5.5 at the least in between fights. I know that's kind of tough because you kind of go fight camp right into fight camp or with a little bit of time off. Sandhagen O'Malley at the White House. Main card fight along with, I don't know, Kayla Harrison, Amanda Nunes, Jon Jones versus somebody, Pereira versus Aspinall, and like McGregor versus Chandler. Like, I'm just saying it's possible. Or Izzy versus Strickland rematch, something like that. Sandhagen O'Malley, UFC White House in June next year. Trump actually just announced it's going to be June 14th, which is a Sunday, weirdly enough. Quick break. If you're loving this video and you want more from Fight Society, click that join button down below to become a channel member today, where you'll get access to members-only live streams, behind-the-scenes vlogs, and all the unfiltered stuff that we don't post to the main channel. Back to the video. Moving on from there, we have the guy that lost to Youssef Zalal on the main card. And I see some people giving him people way, way down in the ranks, like no names. What I think you got to do is you got to give him Gene Silva. You do Josh Emmett, Gene Silva, pay-per-view main card, because Josh Emmett has fought for an interim title against Yair, so he's a recognizable name. He's been around for a while. He had that viral KO of Bryce Mitchell. Gene Silva lost in a very sick fight, short fight, but sick fight in a main event at Noche UFC. He lost to a guy in Diego Lopez that gave Volk a really, really competitive fight in a loss. Gene Silva doesn't deserve a massive jump back up. They're talking about Gene Silva, Yair, Arnold Allen. I saw somebody throw out. Josh Emmett needs to fight Gene Silva. They're ranked like 9 and 10 or 9 and 11 right now at featherweight. Perfect main card filler on a pay-per-view. Josh Emmett still has some value in his name. Gene Silva doesn't deserve a massive jump up. Them both coming off of losses, ranked almost the same. So many markers tell me that Emmett versus Silva is a good fight to make, and that's just the stakes of it. It doesn't even include the fact that these guys are both animals with a lot of knockout power. This would be fireworks to open a pay-per-view main card. The guy that beat Josh Emmett, Youssef Zalal, deserves a massive jump. He submitted Josh Emmett from the bottom with an armbar. I think you put him up against a top 5 guy who submitted Josh Emmett from bottom with a triangle for the interim belt, and that's Yair Rodriguez. Youssef Zalal deserves a massive jump up. His story, the way that he got cut, came back. He gave Ilya a really hard fight early on in both of their UFC careers. Yair beat Patricio Pitbull. Really not that impressive of a win. Patricio beat Dan Ige. Yair would smoke Dan Ige. Both of these guys are kind of long and lanky for the division. A lot of explosiveness. Zalal is really tricky. Yair is very creative. Zalal versus Yair, I don't know, April next year, something like that. April next year, June next year, International Fight Week next year. I don't know how long Yair wants to sit out. Maybe, you know what? No, you make this quick. You make this quick because Youssef Zalal took no damage. Yair's been out since April. January, Los Angeles, main card slot. I'm already building that first Paramount card for him. That's what I think. The first Paramount card, Zalal, Yair Rodriguez, O'Malley, Song Yadong, Merab, Peter Yan, Ilya Gaethje. There's 4 out of the 5 on the main card right there. I think that's a pretty sick event. I'm not going to lie. Moving on from there to Joe Pyfer. Had some setbacks in his career. I know he lost to Jack Hermanson, but he bounced back. He beat Kelvin Gastelum, and then he just submitted Abus Magomedov. It is time for a ranked opponent, and I think a very fun fight for Joe Pyfer, Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa and Joe Pyfer makes all the sense in the world. All the sense in the world. Put it on the freaking, put it on the White House card for all I care. Make it a White House prelim. That's a long ways out though. I think, fuck, I keep talking about the White House. It's still a little too far out. It's 8 months away. 8 months away? Yeah, that's a little too far. Put it on like March or April, something like that, because Paulo Costa said he was going to accept the fight against Shara Magomedov in Qatar, and Shara Magomedov's unranked. Joe Pyfer is now ranked 15th and Paulo Costa's like 12. I think this makes a ton of sense. And tell me, Joe Pyfer, as salty as he is, going up against just troll, hilarious fucking Paulo Costa, would not make for a fun build-up, a fun press conference, and both of these guys throwing haymakers at each other would make for a super fun fight. I'm not just considering the stakes with these fights, I'm also considering the fights themselves. Pyfer versus Costa would be a fucking sick fight, if you ask me. I would probably take Pyfer to win as long as he doesn't gas out. We move on from there to the biggest hyped prospect in the UFC right now, along with a couple other people, but the biggest hyped prospect in the UFC, and definitely the most hyped prospect on UFC 320, Atiba Gautier, absolutely ran through Trayvon Giles, something like that. He is very good and tough and explosive, but he hasn't been tested at all. The guy that he fought did not want to be in there. He was booked against Ozzy Diaz before that, who's terrible too. I don't think you give him a ranked guy yet, but I think you give him a serious test. And I think that serious test is Brad Tavares. I think Brad Tavares, Atiba Gautier, it's either a direct, obvious fraud check because Brad Tavares is like 37, 38 years old, taking a ton of damage, not ranked anymore, lost a lot recently. If Atiba Gautier can't get past him, then he's not the prospect that we think he is. If he absolutely smokes Brad Tavares, give him a top 10 guy for all I care. Give him a Marvin Vettori after that. So I definitely have Atiba Gautier getting a big step up from the absolute can that he fought at UFC 320. And I put him up against Brad Tavares, a real test, a big middleweight. This will really show us how good Atiba Gautier is in terms of getting a ranked opponent. Now, the winner of another prelim from Poland, he beat Patchy Mix by decision. And I thought he should have lost, I'm not going to lie, but he won. Jakub Wiklacz. I think that's how you say his name. Jakub Wiklacz. I say you put him up against another up-and-coming prospect that did very well and beat Chris Gutierrez on the same card as him this past weekend, Javid Basharat. You have 17-3 Wiklacz, and then you have 14 or 15-0 Basharat. Winner of that gets a top 15 or 10 guy, in my opinion. At that point, you'd deserve it. And especially Javid Basharat, undefeated in the UFC, undefeated overall. Wiklacz beat Patchy Mix, which even though he gets clowned a lot, that is a win that deserves some sort of step up. So there is my fights to make after UFC 320. Pereira moving up to heavyweight to fight Aspinall, vacating the belt. That means Jiri versus Carlos Olberg for the vacant belt. Ankalaev versus Roundtree. Merab versus Peter Yan rematch. Corey Sandhagen versus Sean O'Malley at the White House, regardless of what happens with Sean O'Malley, Song Yadong. Josh Emmett, Gene Silva, Youssef Salal, and Yair Rodriguez, January on the Los Angeles card. Joe Pyfer, Paulo Costa, Atiba Gautier, Brad Tavares, and Jakub Wiklacz against Javid Basharat. Let me know what you guys think. Who would you have matched these guys up with? I know Pereira called out Jon Jones, but the Aspinall fight makes a lot more sense. Let me know what you guys would book down below. Do you want more from Fight Society? Like and subscribe below this video and click the join button to become a channel member today to get access to behind the scenes vlogs and members only live streams.